Now, regular viewers of this channel will know if there's one thing that I hate, it's landlords. I hate landlords, like any good Marxist would, as a Marxist myself. Not a big fan of the old landlords. I post many a Chairman Mao meme on the internet. Obviously, I'm not a Maoist myself, but I do this. I disagree with this peasant policy, but I do approve of his landlord policy. Anyway, landlords are a continuous problem in this country because, in the wake of right to buy and the overqualification of our housing sector and continual restrictions on additional housing construction, too many of our houses, in a world where we had a decade of incredibly low interest rates, have been allowed to be bought up by landlords because we treat it too much like a speculative investment rather than thinking about the actual utility of what housing is supposed to represent, which is places for people to live on. Rents have continually gone up. The issue with the increase in mortgage rates over the past however many months has caused a massive crisis on how people can afford their rent. And rents have continually gone up well and above the increase in wages that's basically been non-existent, as wages have been stagnant for the past decade or so. And this has been a decades-long problem with the fact that housing continually has to go up in price because of the issues with negative equity, the fact that so many of our legislators already have property investments. For example, 26% of Tory MPs are landlords. Tony Blair has a property empire, and that shows you how little division there is between the two parties on the issue of housing, because they want to protect a moneyed class of asset-rich boomers who got rich out of right to buy and the over-commodification of property, for example. So a lot of property in this country is held up as a speculative asset for landlords to be able to continually extract huge amounts of money from. Because why would you bother buying up, renovating and selling on when you can buy it up and then continually extract huge amounts of rental profit whilst the actual asset itself increases over time? You're essentially getting somebody else who's poorer than you to pay off your mortgage. Now, obviously, I think that the practice of landlordism is bad regardless of who does it. But there's a sliding scale here, folks. There is a sliding scale as to how bad a landlord can be. And someone who has one property that they're renting out, for example, who doesn't raise the rent, is far less bad than the couple that we're about to look at, folks. My God, this story is absolutely unreal and is incredibly mouth-pilling for basically anybody who's reading this. It's been going viral on Twitter, but I thought I'd cover it on my stream as well. And it shows you the level to which the political control of policymaking by landlords in this country has gotten to pretty obscene nadir at this point. Revealed, the jet-setting couple who have bought an entire village in Wales and raised rents by 60%. Is this an inelastic market, you might think? Marketizing something that's inelastic, that's going to go really well, isn't it? Strokey beard. I wonder what the potential consequences of might be of continual marketization of this stuff on a free market basis as well. This is just somebody who's engaging in behavior that is within their own interest under the profit motive. So it should be fine, quite frankly, as far as the free marketeers are concerned about this stuff. Let's have a look. Lisa Walsh, 30, and husband Chris bought Aberlefenni and raised the rents. A millionaire jet-setting couple who enjoy a life of luxury are forcing an entire village out of the homes they've lived in for decades by ramping up the rent by insane amounts. And the thing is, when we hear about these stories, we keep hearing about these horrendous large corporations doing the same thing, like BlackRock and TSB and Vanguard, all of these things like that, for example. But smaller companies are doing the same things as well because they know that the assets are going to always appreciate over time because no government can let them depreciate, and because rental income is incredibly well protected and the law entirely favours landlords and the rentier class, quite frankly. This sounds like something out of the Middle Ages. Well, you know how we're watching Gary Stevenson's video about the asset economy and how it essentially has become neo-feudalism? This is the result. This is the result, folks, of the asset economy. This isn't literally feudalism. It is feudalism. The people paying a tithe to the landowner who owns all of the housing in the area, right? They've bought an entire village. They've become the feudal lords of this village. And because the market itself is inherently inelastic, as housing markets tend to be, they have the ability to be able to raise the rents because they know that the supply of housing is going to stay fixed for a reasonably long time. And so if these people who exist already can't pay the rent, they'll be able to find somebody who's desperate for housing who's going to pay the increased rate. And no matter how much they jack up the prices, the need will always be there because it's not something that you can do without. Not only is the supply relatively inelastic because of restricting planning laws and things like that, the demand is naturally inelastic because everybody needs a fucking house. And this is the problem with trying to over-marketize things that shouldn't be marketized, or at least not marketized to the insane amount that we have at the moment. Actually, scrap that. This is more like the Highlands clearances or the enclosures. Yeah, exactly, 100%, 100%. Property begets more landlords who beget more property ad infinitum reductio ad absurdum. Exactly, because where do you think all of the money that they're going to be making from these rental properties is going to go? It's going to go into investing in more more houses, which will then continue to push the prices up. That's why people telling you, oh well, at least the high interest rates on mortgages is going to force down property prices. That's not going to happen, mate. As soon as the properties look close to dropping in price, all of the cash buyers will come in and they'll turn them into rental properties. That is the toxic cycle that we have right now. In the even a massive increase in mortgage rates is not going to actually push down prices at all. Like we were told was going to happen during the pandemic, but never did. Like we were told that there was going to be a massive drop in housing prices over the pandemic, and they just continue to go up and up and up and up and up. Right over the course of the last year, I think it is, since I bought my house. Right, I have made more money in increased housing equity than I have in my job. That's how ridiculous the system we're in is at the moment. Anyway, back to these fuckers, right? Landlords Lisa Walsh and her husband Chris, 35, live a lavish life of travelling across the world, all while they are forcing people out of their homes in Abergavenny, North Wales, with massive rent hikes Mail Online can reveal. Mrs. Walsh posted photos outside a 5-star Bellagio in Las Vegas in 2019, the luxury hotel and casino featuring Ocean's 11. Her Facebook cover photo backdrop is a stunning view of the Greek island of Santorini. It's interesting how we're getting an anti-bourgeois agitprop from the Daily Mail of all places. Because that's the problem, is that people on a visceral level know that this is unfair. They know that this is immoral, right? And this is an explicit leftist position that it is immoral. And then I wonder what solutions Mail Online might provide to this thing. They'll get people angry, and then they won't actually propose any solutions. Of course they won't, because it's the Mail Online. But I'm telling you what the solution is, and this is ban landlords. Ban landlordism. Stop marketizing this. Demarketize the housing sector. Because this will continue to happen unless you demarketize it. Simple as that. Simple as that. Even if there was a housing crash, everybody knows the prices would eventually recover, so buy cheap and sell expensive, 100%. Has the Daily Mail gone
neoliberalism?
Oh, thank you for the resubscription at the best time. Yes, fucking neoliberalism indeed, young black economist. I do believe that this is a problem of fucking neoliberalism. But this is true. This is the Daily Mail finally going woke by attacking successful individuals just engaging in smart business practice and engaging in behaviour that is within their own personal interests. I can't believe that you as the Daily Mail would be so woke as to attack for someone acting in their own rational self-interest. Crazy, isn't it? Wild stuff. The couple are a husband and wife team who bought the entire historic Welsh mining village of Abergavenny for £1 million and are forcing out tenants with huge rent increases of up to 60%. Mother of two, Sarah Lewis, has lived in this village for 22 years and said she was in tears at the prospect of being left homeless by the 26% rent hike. This is all the photos that you get. This is the persona non grata that they're being created by. I stress again, this is the Daily Mail talking about this stuff. Like the Daily Mail know their readership has anti-landlord too, because we all fucking are, and because we all should be. Yet we won't see any policy that is done to address this by any government, which is very frustrating to me. And this, I mean, literally, these photos are agitprop. This is the kind of stuff that I would be spreading within my communist cell as to why we should hate the bourgeois. Literally, the Daily Mail's cancelling landlords for good. Disabled pensioner Brian Kugler, 70, said he's been left with just £3 a month to live on after the lavish landlord super couple increased his rent by nearly 60% from £380 to £595 a month. My head is all over the place. I can't afford the rent and don't have the money to cover it. If I had to pay £579 a month, I would be left with just £3 a month for food, running my car and bills. I am really bloody angry at the council and the landlord. How can the landlord put the rent up by so much? How can that be right? A very interesting question, Brian. A very interesting question about how it could be right for them to be able to do this and put the rent up by so much. And the reason is because this welcome to neoliberalism, baby. Welcome to capitalism, right? Everything, as long as it's within somebody's rational self-interest, must be correct according to neoliberal ideology. It must be correct. How dare you? How dare you sully the good name of Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand by saying that it might not be right for someone to act in their own rational self-interest? Weird, that. Crazy. I can't believe you would be so woke as to criticize the basic functioning of a free market. This article is the greatest broken clock ever. Exactly. Fucking neoliberalism. Brian has the emotive language is what I love here as well. Brian has lived in the cottage with his Cocker Spaniel Labrador Cross Jake for 14 years. The pensioner added, "All this had an impact on my health. I am not very well. I didn't have a Christmas last year because of all of this. Why can't the council help out with the discretionary payment? How about we ban landlords and we take these people to the redacted in Minecraft, theoretically, in the video game Roblox?" Weird that. Why should, again, where the only response to this is, how can the state expend extra huge amounts of money having to subsidize people to pay for the ludicrous costs that are being put on them by over-marketized neoliberal institutions, right? It happens everywhere in the economy, right? We pay huge amounts in housing benefit out from the state to help people pay for their ludicrous rent bills because we won't actually increase regulations on landlords. We have to pay out huge amounts in childcare because we're having to subsidise the fact that people pay shit wages so that they can't have someone staying at home with the kids. Why we have huge amounts of people in work, in full time, in food banks or universal credit, is because the government and the state is having to bail out the fact these companies won't pay better wages. All of the failures of neoliberalism are having to be fed by huge amounts of public money. Huge amounts of public money because the government is not doing its job at regulating this shit properly. And that's the problem, again, because of fucking neoliberalism. You know, I was like, surely no justice. You can't blame every single, both economic and social in this country on neoliberalism. Fuck off. Yes, I can. I absolutely can blame it all on neoliberalism because it was all indeed neoliberalism's fault. I mean, if anything is a microcosm of the failures of neoliberalism, this is it. This is literally the failures right here, right here. And again, a libertarian will come to me and say, well, clearly, if this is a problem of neoliberal capitalism, then why, perchance, is there far too much state planning regulation on building new houses, right? Why is there so much state regulation? Because if the supply was more elastic, we would be able to deal with this issue through an increase in supply. And I'm like, well, unfortunately, capitalism requires a state to function. And in a neoliberal state where huge amounts of power is in the hands of private enterprise and private individuals and private companies and people who get rich off the profit motive, they're going to control the state. They're going to control the small state that you tell us that we should have to deal with engaging in protecting property rights and having a working justice system to again facilitate the protection of those property rights. And they're going to, through the control of that state, ensure that through their own material interests, policies are proposed that protect the people with the money who put them there in the first place. It's really not difficult to break apart the pathetically silly and blue sky thinking of neoliberal ideologues when it comes to the issues of the role of the state in all of this, because it fundamentally will end up being corrupted eventually at some point. And they have no plan for this because, again, their entire ideology is based off this nonsense of praxeology, which is the idea that everyone operates within rational self-interest 100% of the time, and no one can have their views swayed by propaganda or advertising outside of that. And it was obviously complete nonsense. Very, very frustrating. And even then, lax planning regulations. Well, I mean, what are you going to turn? We're going to pave over the entirety of the green areas of the UK and turn them all into single-family residential housing like they have in the United States? It's non-workable. You actually need the state to come in. The state needs to come in with a plan to build high-density housing to solve these issues, to increase the supply, because you can only trust the government to actually do the supply that is there for human need, which is there to serve utility, rather than to serve the profit motive, which is inherently corrupting. That's the issue. That's the big issue. Go back to that Tom Harwood segment that I released earlier. Anyway, back to these landlords. Welsh Investment Properties has since reduced Brian's rent to £550 a month, leaving him with £45. How gracious! How gracious this investment property is deigning to be for the serfs that has control of. I'm going to reduce the 60% increase to a far more reasonable 50% increase. That is how generous the Lord is being for their serfs today. So kind indeed. After the Walshes snapped up the entire village, several tenants were served with Section 21 no-fault eviction notices. Brilliant. Love it. Great. Amazing. Just what we wanted to see. Like Brian, fellow tenant Sarah Lewis also faces eviction and is so enraged she has mounted a daily sit-down protest against the charges for 16 former quarrymen's houses and cottages in the village, which are surrounded by stunningly beautiful scenery. The mum of two, whose rent has increased from £435 to £550 a month, has also hit out at Gwynedd Council. She said, my universal credit contains £300 for my rent, and the council currently leaves me £49 from its discretionary fund to pay for the shortfall. Wouldn't it be amazing, right, if the state owned these houses and they would have to pay none of this money out in discretionary funds to pay for the rental? Imagine if the state owned these instead of, because what's happening here is the money is coming from the state, going to the renters, and then to the pockets of the landlords, which is essentially we have the state subsidizing landlords here. This is how stupid this position is. Such how silly this position is. It's the worst of both worlds. Absolutely is the worst of both worlds. Where, it infuriates me that the state is willing to throw out huge amounts of money into the pockets of the richest people in the country, as they have done over the past 13 years, right? All that quantitative easing that went into the pockets of the rich during the austerity period, all of that quantitative easing that went into the pockets of the rich during the pandemic, and all the additional money that's getting paid out to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich, because all of the commodities that are relied upon for regular members of the public to exist have been over-marketized and have been cartelized by neoliberal goons who want to make a quick buck at the expense of the general public. And they're allowed and are incentivized to do this by a government who's going to pick up the slack using public money. It's the worst of both worlds if you aren't a landlord and therefore have a monopoly on political power. True JDM. It is indeed a function of the monopoly of political power on asset owners in this country. Weird that. Strange situation to be in. I don't have enough savings and I cannot work because I have severe emphysema and need oxygen at all times. The council are being heartless and have caused me so much stress that is making me ill. When I received the phone call, I was in tears. They are making me homeless and do not care. How ill do I have to be to qualify for a discretionary payment? Sarah's also a grandmother added, I am going to sit down and protest on this bench until it is sorted or until I die. Well, that is the real solution to this system, right? To this problem.
Because I'm literally a communist.
Hey, David, thank you for joining the stream today. The real solution to this issue is a rent strike. It's a rent strike and it's a refusal to leave. Like, you take the process as long as you can. Do not pay any rent. Fight the Section 21 notice. Get these people from Welsh investment properties to pay out all the money they can in court to get you removed, right? Make it as hard as possible. Sit down, protest, fine, that's absolutely goes. But rent strikes are impossible, are possible. And making sure that they jump through every single possible hoops they have to get you out of the house in the first place. That's what they need to do. They need to take this as far as they can, and for as long as they can, and cause these people as much stress as possible. And I'm not saying cause any criminal damage to the properties. That's definitely not what I'm saying. Should you start losing in these court cases or start getting evicted, that's not what I'm saying at all. You definitely should not do that. But engaging in rent strikes is the first port of call that should happen in this position, because you know that this is a person who has a monopoly on this particular area. So there's no competition, there's no market competition to be able to help this. You have to engage in some kind of strike because you know that is against their material interests. A rent strike is the best way to organise against this right now. If I end up catching flu or pneumonia, I am dead. I don't want to move from the house I've lived in for 22 years. Ms. Lewis said her rent has increased by £200 each month after the former quarrymen's homes were bought. I would rather die than leave this village. My support network is here. My family is from here. It's become my haven and I don't want to live anywhere else. And this is the problem, right? Is that people will say, well, if you don't like it, move somewhere else. The market should solve the issues by giving you the ability to be able to choose where you want to live. And I'm like, that doesn't work when you look at the real utility of any of this. It doesn't work when you actually look at how humans function, how society should function. But unfortunately, neoliberalism doesn't believe in society. It doesn't believe in the social contract. It doesn't believe that there should be anything outside of the profit motive and people acting within a market. That's the only thing that it believes in. And when you try and bring up any other, for example, consideration like where people's support bases are, the community that exists, for example, any other human consideration outside of profit, outside of what people should be doing within the market, neoliberalism has no answer. It has no answer to this because it doesn't fucking believe in it in the first place. I believe I'm going to be made homeless because I cannot get help. My universal credit covers £300. The council will not be paying the extra cost. I've been told I need to pay it myself with my benefits, but I can't afford an extra £200 a month. Lewis continues, who can't work due to her illness, has applied to the council for discretionary funding support, which she claims she's now been told no in terms of receiving any financial help. But the issue really shouldn't be with the council. The issue here is entirely with the landlords. And that's interesting. So that's why That's the framing that is being pushed by the Daily Mail article. I wonder where the framing was going to come from. And the framing is going to be that the council should be the ones picking up the slack here. It's interesting how they framed it for so long as being, well, the issue is the fact that the landlords have a monopoly, so they're able to raise the rent. And then there's all of this framing saying, well, no, the council should be stepping in to subsidise the fact that these millionaire property investors are able to do this, rather than think of, no, this should be banned. This should be banned completely. They shouldn't be allowed to do this. Should be laws against them doing this. Universal basic services, yeah, absolutely, we should do that. But the issue is that new landlords should just get mowed. Quite frankly, at this point, I'm fully mow-pilled on this particular issue. The problem is clearly that the rich people aren't being given enough money. True, JDM. How incredibly true of a statement you're making right there. She is now staging a one-woman protest on the village bench to highlight her plight, knowing it can make her seriously ill. I'm sitting on the bench every day because I'd rather make myself ill than live elsewhere. I'm at the end of my tether. I'm sorry. I understand what you're trying to do there. I don't think it's going to work. I think there are probably more effective protests that you can do other than sitting on a bench. Tenant Janice Taylor, 61, is backing her friend's protest. The grandmother said, I am lucky because my husband works full-time and I do seasonal work so we can afford the increase. Sarah said she will continue her one-woman protest on the village bench until the situation is resolved. And that's the issue, is that unless you can properly get solidarity to engage in collective action, where everyone gets involved, people will continue to be able to do this, right? The reason why the government was forced into the energy price guarantee was the potential of millions of people refusing to pay their energy bills. And so they had to take action. And so you have to take action in the same way here. Even if you can afford the rental increase, you have to put your foot down and refuse to pay. You have to be a person who engages in the rent strike too. If that might theoretically affect you, then tough shit. If you want to actually look after your community or the people that you live with, rather than thinking only on a individualized basis and an atomized basis on this, there will not be a solution to the ways in which neoliberalism essentially destroys society. It destroys community. It destroys, the basic things that make us human at the end of the day. Quite frankly. And unless you put your own interests aside on this one, you need to stand in solidarity with the people who are getting evicted. And that's what neoliberalism has sought to do by seeking to destroy community and destroying those bonds and destroying collective action. It has put the minds of these people that they cannot be in the position where they should show solidarity on a material basis rather than just with words. The rich bastards aren't human, they're vampires. I mean, I'm not far off, really. This is definitely vampiric behaviour if I've ever seen it. Definitely vampiric behaviour. The Walshes have a burgeoning buy-to-let empire advertised on Facebook from their base in Chester, which they set up shortly after they got married in 2017. The rich pair were born and bred in the area and run Walsh Investment Properties, which bought the whole village in Gwynedd last November. Although the company, which bought all 16 houses in the slate mining village of Aberlefenny, Gwynedd, just outside Snowdonia National Park, is registered to an address in London, the couple are both Welsh. As well as their property empire, Mrs. Walsh runs the thriving Hannah's House Day Nursery in Rill, and Mr. Walsh is a boss of building company EMW and Developments Limited. And this just shows you, right? Shows you. Whenever a landlord tries to tell you that their job is worth the money that you pay them, that they have a real job that they do, that they are a functioning part of the economy, just look at this, right? They can own and be landlords of 16 houses where they make they make money hand over fist, having increased people's rents by 60% in some cases. They still have enough time on their hands to be the directors of a nursery and of an entire fucking building company, right? If you can be the director of an entire business on your own, and also have the ability to be able to spend another however much time making money hand over fist from investment properties as a landlord, right? Landlording is not a job. It doesn't involve any labour, it doesn't involve any work. You just take money, subcontract it out to do everything else. You have a tiny bit of admin you do at the end of the month, which is essentially property management, which you should basically get paid minimum wage for, as far as I'm concerned. Your job as a property manager, you should be getting paid minimum wage. You don't do anything relevant at this point in time. I manage my own house that I live in because I own it. Do I get paid for that? Of course I fucking don't, right? Property management is a small job that doesn't deserve the huge amounts of money people get paid in rent that they justify as being the landlord, right? Because these are technically two different things. But if you can property manage 16 properties and also be the director of another company, then that's not a fucking job, right? That's not an exertion on your part that you're engaging in there. I mean, vampires were literally conceived as an anti-aristocracy satire, so pretty much dead on. Drinking the blood of the poor whilst living in castles, it ain't subtle. Very true, JDM. Mrs. Walsh frequently posts adverts on her Facebook timeline for newly refurbished rental flats and houses in the area, and company accounts of the couple's firm show they own a string of buy-to-let properties with mortgages. The couple recently sold their own £360,000 detached house in Traralgon and are believed to have moved to a much more expensive property near Chester. Latest company accounts show the Walsh Investment Properties has assets of around £4 million in 2022, up from £1.5 million the previous year, but profit figures are not available. All of which will be of little comfort to the residents of Abergavenny, some of whom are reported to have received eviction notices since the Walshes took ownership of their homes in November and began hiking up rents. The village, which was built for workers as a former slate mine, was bought by Walsh Investment Properties after being put up for sale in 2016. So, right, interesting. You know how everybody who gets mad about the World Economic Forum and the theoretical fingers of Klaus Schwab penetrating the governments of loads of different countries around the world, right? And how the big thing they say, the Great Reset is, you will own nothing and be happy, is the thing that they're supposed to be getting frustrated about right now. I tell you what, that didn't start with the World Economic Forum, mate. That's been policy the entirety of the time of this government. That's always been the policy. That is capitalism. Capitalism is you will own nothing and be happy, because over time the assets will go into fewer and fewer hands, and there'll be fewer people who are able to own their own houses, own their own property. And it's not just BlackRock and Vanguard, all of these massive corporations that are trying to own everything themselves and extract rental income from you. It's these people like this as well. Like, you will literally own nothing and be happy. I said you won't be happy, you'll be fucking miserable, because you'll be paying extortionate amounts in rents to houses that were previously being rented out much cheaper, because the market is inelastic, and the richest people in the world have realised that it will be an ever-appreciating asset that they can monopolise and cartelise. Unfortunately, the link didn't work, Scribby, so it didn't let me load it, unfortunately. But the Great Reset was already there, folks, and it's nothing to do with the World Economic Forum. It's just capitalism. It's just neoliberalism. That's all it is. Literally all it is. A community councillor told the BBC, "I believe that the intention is to raise the rent so high that tenants have to move out. Some people who live in the houses are very vulnerable and are going to find it difficult to find the money to pay the difference. Everyone in the village is concerned, some more than others, because of the varying amount the rent goes up. Tenants have been worried about being able to afford the rent hike, with some facing increases up to 60%. The village was previously owned by the family of John Lloyd of Winclett Limited since the 1950s. Amusingly, right, it's not, the problem is that this was in the hands of another whole family beforehand, right? It's just feudal lords passing the lives of tenants in between themselves. It's just one feudal lord was gracious enough not to raise the rents, and the other one was. And it's a broken system, completely broken. The rent rose by 3% per year under the previous owners. Some have lived in their homes for more than 20 years. Chris Walsh told Mail Online that he wanted to reassure the tenants, saying, "We have given them all peace of mind that we are going to work with them to make them stay in their homes." What? "We don't want anyone to move out. We have no plans to turn them into holiday lets or sell them. They've been living in properties where rents are unsustainable, and we have raised the rent to a fair amount, which is still massively below market value." Go fuck yourself, Chris. Go fuck yourself. Honestly, like, if it was unsustainable, how have they been living there for all this time? Like, you own them in cash. You paid cash for these properties. You don't have a mortgage on these properties. This isn't a buy-to-let mortgage that you've taken out here, where you're losing money monthly on the rental amount. You own, it's free money. It's literally free money in rent. It's always been sustainable. The idea that this rent is somehow unsustainable, it's nonsense. It's a lie. It's a straight up fucking lie. You're receiving free money month on month because you have an ownership deed, and you've done nothing. You've not renovated. You've not increased the value of these properties. You're not even the person who built the properties, because you just bought it from another estate that owned all of them in the first place, because you know that it's a cartel that you can make loads of money off. This is a straight up lie. It's absolutely nonsense, and I don't give a shit about market value, because market value doesn't actually properly represent the utility of how much these people can actually afford to be able to live in the houses they've lived in for decades in this particular village. Someone could have bought all these properties and evicted them. We do not plan to do that. Or no one could have bought those properties. Right? The state could have bought those properties and kept the rent where it was and ensured they had tenancies for life. They could have done that, but they didn't. They could have done that. The idea, right? The idea that you are taking through that you're in any way doing something that you're trying to market to us as some positive thing is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Because they literally were in the position where they were happy paying the rent they were paying before. The previous owners were happy paying the rent that they were paying before. That was sustainable at that point, right? Why is it unsustainable now? What's made it unsustainable? What loss are you making by keeping the rents where they currently are? If you're buying these in cash, and they're essentially getting free money monthly out of the thing that you now own the entirety of the asset of, which is continuing to appreciate. You're making money. Just you would be making money if these people were paying zero rent at all. You'd still be making money off of the increase in housing equity as the price of these houses increased over time. And you're now telling us, actually, I need to bleed more blood from this stone over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter how it's going to negatively impact the people's lives who fucking live there. What if we murdered every one of our tenants? We're being very nice given the circumstances. Exactly, this is the level to the kind of neoliberalism brain rot that's infected these people. We have lowered the rents from what was initially proposed by the agent, still to 50% in some cases, who used to manage the properties, and now because we in-house manage them, the rents have been reduced down to rents offsetting the management fees that we are charged. Mr. Walsh and his company had recently fully refurbished one of the 16 homes and agreed a rent of £750 a month. We are giving the existing tenants the peace of mind and security of the future at £550 for the same property. We are not bad landlords. The worry was that people would lose their homes. And that's the problem, is that you think that there are good landlords and bad landlords. Wrong. There are only bad landlords. There is no such thing as a good landlord. The rent seeking they engage in is inherently immoral, of a basic human necessity, right? Landlordism is not a moral position that you can take. There are no good landlords. They're all bad, you included. And you're actually the worst. You are mathematically the worst kind of landlord, because you are fundamentally only concerned with profit. Otherwise, why would you have bought out the entire village in one go, right? Why else would you if you didn't want to cartelize it and massively jack up the rents? It doesn't make any sense. I disagree. A dead landlord is a good landlord, but only in the video game Minecraft. True. It is indeed only specifically a good landlord in the video game Minecraft, specifically in that video game. Very, very true, Big Al. Very, very true. The gentleman who sold the properties to us knew that we wouldn't sell, we wouldn't break them up and would continue to rent them, but the rents would have to increase. A spokesman for Gwynedd Council said, "We are committed to supporting any individual facing difficulties as a result of a housing crisis. All applications for discretionary housing funding presented to us are assessed by our benefits team in a matter of urgency. Whilst we cannot comment on detail in individual cases, we can confirm that this particular application is currently being assessed." Ghouls, villains, worst people on the planet, scum. Chairman Mao, please wake up. We need you. And Uncle Ho as well. We need you to deal with the blight in our society. It's not people smoking inhaling nitrous oxide. It's not people doing their low-level smoking of weed that is a blight or a scourge in our society. It's fucking landlords. Mathematically the worst. And yeah, we should abolish them. Abolish landlordism. Get rid of it forever. Gone. No more landlords. Housing cooperatives only. And the thing is that obviously the previous owners were only putting up the rent by 3%, but they were still happy to sell off to somebody who they knew was going to jack up the rents by a huge amount. Like, no one is good in this situation as far as landlords are concerned. These could be cooperatively owned by the community that has them. But no, neoliberalism says only private ownership, and that private ownership should supersede all, and they should be able to do whatever they want regardless of the negative externalities of what they engage in service of the profit motive. Brilliant, love it. Which is the worst story about landlords I've ever fucking read in my life. So yeah, amazing. Love it. Love our new feudal society that we live in. Definitely a big fan. Definitely a huge fan of the new feudalism that we live in currently. And if you're also a fan of the new feudalism and have spare money to throw around, you can become a member on YouTube for 99p. Please hit like and subscribe, and hit the bell to notify you when I go live. Or if you're watching on Twitch, you can subscribe for $3.99 or for free by connecting your Twitch Prime account to your connect your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch Prime account, and that gives you a free subscription to one of our wonderful creators every single month. You can also drop bits and also donate individually by super thanks or in the description in the link down below.